Up and running?
Yes.
All right, good. As you can see, I'm real Mr. Technology here. All right, well, welcome. This is quite a group today. I mean, it's twice as big as we've ever had. So we must be doing something right, I guess. So just kind of for some of you that have been coming for a long time, I apologize for reiterating what we do. So here's what we do here's what we do every week, okay, is we get together and we go through usually the contract. And every now and then I'll deviate because there's so much to talk about in what's happening in the real world. What happens to a lot of people, and for those of you that don't know, I've been doing this a long time, longer than most of you have been alive. And what I found is when I first got into the business, I had a great mentor. Other agents were failing. And the reason that I thought that they failed, a lot of them to some degree, the reason was they really didn't have somebody who taught them the why. Right. In other words, I think most people are better learners when they understand why we do something, rather than when you go to school and they just say, no, just fill in, friggin' blank. Right. So what we try to do is we try to give, some anecdotal around what it is that we're talking about. And so what we do is every Wednesday at 11 o'clock, we come, we sit down, and I start by sharing things that have happened this week. Right. And the reason I do that is what'll happen is, one of you guys will call me. Let's see, Lori. Hi, Lori. How you doing? Somebody will call me up and say, hey, or text me. That's how most people do it now. I've got this situation. Have you ever had it before? And, what do I do? So as an example, Kelly Williams-Denham, who was in this class a year ago, she's been in the business a whole 14 months, and so far she's closed 27 houses. She's doing okay, but she has a situation. Just to give you an example of what happens in real estate, you've never even had this happen, right? And Nicole, you haven't had it happen yet. She sold a house where it was a house and there was two completely different parcels. One of the parcels was in Placer County, and the other parcel was in Nevada County. But the seller wanted to sell them as a combined unit. What do you do, right? Is it possible to write one purchase agreement? And especially, and this is kind of a trick question, if there's a lender involved. Amber, are you back there somewhere? Okay, yeah. You can come a little bit around. If there's a lender involved, is it possible to write it on one purchase agreement? Who thinks you can write it on one purchase agreement? Who thinks you need to write it on two purchase agreements? You are correct. And so were we. The listing agent has been in the business forever. I think she's sold one house in 20 years. And she insisted on it being on one contract, right? And I told Kelly, I said, that's okay if that's what she wants, but because there's a loan involved, I guarantee you the lender is going to want two separate agreements. Okay, so we wrote two separate agreements. The problem is, to further complicate things, the house is on one of the parcels. Okay. The other parcel is vacant land. There's a county transfer tax of how much per thousand? $1.10 per thousand. One of the parcels, the parcel that was the vacant land, needed to be assigned a value. The parcel with the house needed to be, and this is out in your neck of the woods, needed to be assigned a value, right? So we wrote it. We originally wrote the offer. They were asking $890. We bought it for $890. Now the lender comes back and says, I need two separate agreements. And you need to put a value on the property with the house that will appraise. So the reason I'm telling you guys this is like having first graders and you're trying to teach them advanced calculus. You just never know, right? You just never know what happens. Okay. So that's a great example of something that when it comes up, that'll be a conversation between you and me, right? It's not going to be, what the hell do I do, right? And there are times where I'll call CAR legal line, or I'll call one of the attorneys I know. And I've actually had attorneys say, like when we were going through the COVID with the getting the tenant out of a property during the COVID period of time, I've actually had attorneys telling me, Jeff, you don't want your agents doing that. We don't want to touch a property that's tenant occupied during the COVID crisis because the evictions were stayed. You couldn't get anybody out, right? So we literally had a situation, as an example, down in Orange County, where this is something to remember, and it's intended to scare you guys about tenant occupied properties.
Run.
It was a divorce. The wife never really wanted to sell the house. She wanted to rent the property back at no cost, because we're doing that now. A lot of people, usually we get a rent, right? But now, because we're trying to get our offers accepted, because it's such a strong seller's market, she wanted the property for 45 days after the close of escrow at no cost. Our agent had talked to us, and I said, listen, you don't want to go over how many days when you give somebody a rent back? 29. And the reason is 29 days is a license to stay in the property. 30 days or more. Hey, there she is. And there's one of my former A students. 30 days or more. Christian, don't leave. 30 days or more creates a leasehold estate. So when COVID was going down, that created more rights. It's still going down, right? But some of the protections have supposedly been removed, but some cities have put protections in place. The problem is 45 days comes and the wife, who never wanted to move anyway, who had gotten her money 45 days before, says, I can't move out because of COVID. I can't find a place to move. What's the eviction? What was the eviction process? Nothing.
There wasn't one. Yeah.
There wasn't one. So you got a client, a buyer, who bought a house thinking that they were going to get to move in. Complicate things further, they had given notice where they were, right? And they literally had stuff on a moving truck, right? So they're ready to move into this new house down in Huntington Beach, but they can't move in because the wife is gone. Because what happened, a lot of you guys don't know this, but when that all went down, the state of California provided $25 million for free legal counsel for tenants, right? So all they had to do was go to the free legal counsel, right? And you couldn't get them out. So we had this lady, this young trying to move into this house that they couldn't get into, and we couldn't get the client out. So what did we do? 2 months later, she moved out. So do you think we're going to get a 5-star Zillow review from the buyer? Right. The only good thing is we warned the buyer, right? We warned the buyer that right now during the COVID crisis, and it's still going on to some degree, you don't want to buy a property that could, or you don't want to give a rental agreement any longer than 29 days. And you certainly don't want to buy a property that's tenant occupied. In the purchase agreement, the RPA, and it's going to stay the same in the new one. How many days prior to the close of escrow does it say on a tenant occupied property that the tenant has to be out?
5 days.
5 days. So what happens in the real world? We're so excited that we're going to close the damn escrow. The tenant's not out, but we still go ahead and close it, right? And again, we represent a lot of buyers. And if the tenant doesn't move out like they're supposed to move out, what do? It's a nightmare, right? The reason I'm bringing that up is we had it happen again this weekend, okay? And Saturday, the moving truck shows up. Tenant's there. Tenant hasn't got out. So what do you think we did? We went to the tenant and we wrote him a check for $2,500, basically called cash for keys to get out. Okay. So the reason I'm bringing this up is when you start writing offers for properties that are tenant occupied, right? What you want to make sure is that the tenant is going to be out prior to the close of escrow. We used to just kind of rely on, that people would get out and everything was going to be okay. You can't do that anymore, right? Because since COVID has happened, everything's kind of got screwed up. All right. So another thing happens this last weekend. I get a call. We have a situation. I don't know if Rick's on or not. No. We have a situation where one of our up and coming superstars in Orange County double ends a property. It was a house. You guys got to know the whole story because this is what you will hear. Okay. The seller was going to take $700,000 complete fixer upper. Rick calls me up. He runs into these people. He says, is there any way I can talk him into, I think I can get him more money. I said, how much more money? He says, well, there's comps in the area for like 900, but the house is a piece. Remember this, the people that buy houses to flip them, they don't buy them because they want to lose money or break even, right? So what they do is they offer a lot less. And so I told Rick, I said, listen, if that's what we can get, why don't we talk to him about putting it on the market for 8 and he'll get more money than 700, which is what he was going to take, right? We sell it for 850. 15-day close, all cashed to an investor. 14 days to remove contingencies. The 13th day, the investor, by the way, is a contractor. The 13th day, Rick calls me up and says, hey, I did what you said. The guy's he's not removing that inspection contingency. And I said, this is the guy that's the contractor? He said, yeah. And I said, something's wrong, right? Something's wrong. And he said, well, what do you mean? I said, if he's a contractor, he's already done his walkthrough. He's already told you it's fine. And he's not removing the inspection contingency. And this is what they do. They buy houses, fix them up and turn them. He knows how the game works. He either doesn't have the money or he's not going to sign off. And Rick said, how do you know? And I said, just know, right? I said, you gotta call, because it's also Rick's client. The buyer is represented by Rick and the seller is represented by Rick. Calls me back an hour later. He goes, well, you were right. They don't want to pay $850 now. They say they'll close it. The guy will come down to $820. What do I do? And I said, before you do anything, please tell me that we're still within the timelines of our contingencies. He goes, yeah, it's supposed to be removed tomorrow. The reason for that, and the reason I'm telling you guys this, because it'll happen, Haley, you will do this, right? There will be a time when you will double into property, right? And in California, there's nothing illegal about it. It's just you're walking a really, really thin line, okay? And so I said, please, so what that means is the contract, we always talk about what does the contract say? But when you double into property, you really need to stick with what does the contract say, right? So I said, okay, so he's told you that, and he's not willing to remove the inspection contingency. He said, that's correct. And I said, the reason being is he wants to be able to get out of the deal and get his deposit back. Because by the way, the guy put a $50,000 deposit down, okay? Because it's an investor purchase, not an owner occupied purchase. And some of you that are, your heads are spinning right now, but some of you ACE students been around for a while. Liquidated damages only applies to what? 1 to 4 units of which one will be owner occupied. Correct. right? So the buyer actually put down a bigger deposit, right? Because they wanted to get the property. And so anyway, so Rick said no. And I said, okay, so here, everything, we have until tomorrow. I said, the first thing we have to do is we need to call the seller. We need to tell them what just transpired, right?
He didn't do
And-
an
and-
farm?
Well, we want to call the seller first,
Okay.
right? Because who owns the house? Us or the seller? The seller,
Yeah.
right? So our obligation is to communicate. I always tell my sellers on listing presentations and everything else, one of the things that I always remember, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, is it's your house, not mine, right? My job is to communicate everything that happens, and I will, okay? So we call the seller, we get him on the line, his name's Larry, he's a construction guy, he's not happy, right? And so long story short, we told him, listen, the contingency is due to be removed tomorrow, right? We thought this guy was going to remove it. Fortunately, Larry was at the house when the buyers went through and inspected it and said, hey, it looks better than we thought. There was no reason to think that anything was out of whack, which in itself is a lesson, right? You've got to adhere to the timelines on the contract. And so he said, well, I want to keep the guy's deposit. And I said, technically, he still has his inspection contingency out there, Larry. You're not going to get the deposit, but what we don't want to do is waste any more time, right? And so sure enough, the buyer who has legal counsel, they write up something saying, we'll close, we'll remove the contingency, but we want the property for 820. Larry says, no way. I'll put the house back on the market. I'll keep it, whatever, right? We then gave them a notice to perform. We told Larry why we needed to give them a notice to perform, okay? How many days prior to the expiration of a contingency, not a contingency to close escrow, but a contingency in the close escrow, how many days prior can you deliver a notice to perform? 2, okay? And I know you're like, what the hell is all this stuff, right? 2 days before, right? So we were on the 14th day. We could have done it 2 days before. The attorney's obviously given him, because he's reading the contract or anything. Long story short, we did everything right. We basically signed cancellations and we got out of any trouble, right? Even though we didn't sell the house and Larry's not happy with us. But he found out that really we didn't do anything wrong. There's a couple lessons in there, Amber, right? And Christian back there in the back. There's a couple lessons there. Number one is we tried to do basically a 15-day close of escrow. You guys have heard me talk about this before. Prior to the seller's market getting so crazy, we didn't do 15-day close of escrows. We did 30. Why did we do 30? Sometimes we did 45 on government, FHA and VA. Why? Because it takes a while to get everything done. So what happened is we basically painted ourselves into a corner a little bit, right? 14 days to remove the contingencies and 15 days to close escrow. Everything looked great. I mean, literally the buyers and sellers were having a beer on the porch a week before, right? So everything looked great. There was no reason to think that anything was going to go wrong. The lesson here is you've got to adhere to what the contract says, right? Especially when you double into property. So when can you deliver a notice to perform on the inspection contingency? 2 days before, right? Does everybody do that? No, right? Usually, hey, today's the day it's supposed to be done. And what normally happens, right, Nicole, is listen, we just got the inspections back yesterday. We're working through them. I'll get you something over this afternoon, right? Okay. What I sometimes say depends on how I'm feeling about things and how I talk to my seller. I say, listen, hey, you're my seller now. I say, hey, here's what's going on. The contingency is supposed to be removed tomorrow. I just talked to the buyer's agent. They just got the inspections back today, right? We're trying to get this thing done in a short period of time. I need your permission to tell her that we can wait until tomorrow. If you want me to, I can still give them a notice to perform, right? Which basically says that they need to remove the contingency within 2 days of that notice. So here's a question that comes up all the time, Nicole, right? So Saturday, I get a call from one of the people online who will go unmentioned. And it's a good question. She says, listen, I'm in escrow and we're going back and forth with the seller. And I have to remove my contingency on Monday, which was day before yesterday, right? And but we're going back and forth, and I'm working really well with the listing agent. Everything seems to be really Do I still need to remove the contingency on Monday because that's the date? Or because we're in negotiations, does it just kind of automatically extend? What's the answer?
Not automatic.
Nothing automatically extends. Nothing automatically extends, right? What happens a lot, and ooh, easy, Monica, putting all that heavy weight against that thing, huh? all 90 pounds. So why I'm telling you guys this story is you got to remember, because you're going to have transactions going, your transactions, it's a lot of stuff going on, right? And it's like, okay, what do I need to make sure that I don't forget? The dates that I can't forget. You need to put them in your iPhone. You need to put them, your TC. This is the thing that a lot of people tell me. Well, my TC didn't tell me about that. For those of you who know, that's a transaction coordinator. Okay. My TC didn't tell me. And I always say the same thing. It's not the TC's job, right? The TC is not responsible for making sure things get done. A good one will help you, right? But really the responsible person is you. You're the licensed agent, right? So the moral of this story here, and why I wanted to bring it up today, is we had a situation where the listing agent who was newer and our agent who's newer, everything was going really, really well. So on Monday, I get a call from our agent who's representing the buyer, and she says, hey, the listing agent just called me and said that her seller's really upset. And I said, well, why? And she said, because the seller's friend's an attorney and says that we're supposed to remove the contingency. We're basically out of contract. Is that correct? Kind of, right? Because the listing agent didn't deliver the notice to perform. Now, this is something that you guys, and for again, I keep saying it for you guys that are brand new, it's kind of a little bit complicated. You cannot deliver a cancellation and have it and expect it to be enforceable if you don't first adhere to the contract and give the notice to perform. Does everybody understand that? Okay. It's in the contracts. A lot of times what will happen is, well, I sent them a cancellation. Well, yeah, and maybe sometimes they'll just go ahead and sign it, right? But you can't force somebody to sign a cancellation if you don't adhere to the contract. And the contract's very clear. It says prior to a cancellation being delivered, it's the other, whether it's the buyer side or the seller side, you have to deliver the notice to perform. Everybody understands that, right? Amber's over there going, okay, I find this stuff brand new, first day, right? First day. But it's important to remember that. Okay. So Christian, I'll let you get back to your stuff. Come over here for a second. Because Christian's like an old pro. He's been in the business now how long?
6.5 months.
Six and a half. Working with him on Dress for Success. but
You're failing, John.
But how many deals have you put in escrow and how many have you closed?
I have 8. I've closed 6.
Okay, not bad, right? Actually, very, very good. That's just so that to kind of set the bar for you guys. That's exceptional. So round of applause. One of the things that I like about Christian, when he first came in, he's been in the business a whole 2 days, and he came around the corner and said, listen, I need to make some money. And I said, no shit. That's I've never heard that before. So that's a good thing. And then we started talking. He's a little bit fortunate because his mother's a real estate agent up in Reading, and he's got some background. Most of his family is, so that helps, right? But what I wanted Christian to talk about, because Aaron brought it up today, and a lot of you bring it up, is you show houses, and I mean, how do you get them to write the damn offer, right, Haley? Right? And how do I ask? I don't want to be too pushy. At the same time, I don't want to just be a glorified taxi cab driver. I mean, what do I do? So Christian, pretend for a moment with me for the good of the group, because you were sitting here not that long ago, trying to figure out the answer to the same question, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what do you say to people when you're showing them? You've showed them, you're out at the house. You've showed it, the body language is there. What body language do you look for? How do you get people to write an offer? You've had real success with that.
When I first meet with the person, I'll just kind of make sure that when they're walking around, you can just tell a lot by the way that somebody's walking, the way that they look, the eye contact that they're giving you, the things that they're looking for. They look at something and kind of go, or they walk away from it. You can just tell if they kind of like a property more so. So just pay attention to that. And then right before they leave, I'll say, hey, what are you thinking? Kind of just see where they're at.
Not what do you think? What are you thinking?
Yeah.
There's a big difference there, by the way.
And just kind of go from there and take that and use that information and then just be like, hey, so I've showed you this many properties. You know, this is in your price range. This is pretty much the only properties that are going to be working for you at this time.
Got 99 problems, but a bitch ain't one. I got 99 problems, but a bitch ain't one.
This is the best moment for you. Capitalize on this moment. And I promise if you do, I'll get you through this contract and we'll get you into some.
Okay.
Pretty much it. And then I'll pull comps on a bunch of homes too, show different homes to them, see, you know, if the price is something that they think is comparable and they think that they could maybe make a profit on if they're an investor. But if it's someone just trying to get their first home, like a first home buyer, you just kind of just show them the ropes and just guide them and just try to make them trust you.
So when you say show them the ropes, how do you explain to people that this is still a very strong seller's market and they need to come in? Because one of the things I've noticed with you is when you write your offers, you write very strong offers on properties. How do you get them to write a strong offer rather than coming in 10% below or whatever?
So I always make them do at least 1 to 3% for EMD. And then I'll always every single
That's a
offer I
deposit.
wrote,
That's a deposit.
every single offer I wrote, I make them do at least.
You don't make them,
I
strongly recommend.
them,
Yeah.
yeah.
strongly recommend. I just say, well, if you want this home, this is what we have to do.
Right.
And I just tell them to cover escrow and title fees. If they're comfortable in removing maybe a contingency, depending on what the contingency is, if they really love the home, if they're willing to let that go, help them remove a contingency. And also I'll put in other terms. I'll write an accelerator clause, which basically just specifies that if a price, if we're going at this price, but we're willing to go $2,000 over the next highest offer up to this amount.
Not to exceed.
And then that usually, honestly, that is one of the biggest things too, because it's only $1,000 to $2,000 over the next highest price. But if you're covering escrow and title fees, you're talking an extra potentially thousands of dollars. So,
and how do you explain that to a client if they say, what does that mean? You know, the accelerator clause, I've never heard of that. What does that mean?
Exactly. Pretty much exactly how I write it. I just make it as straightforward as possible. I try to be as straightforward as possible with anybody I'm dealing with so that they know exactly what to expect beforehand. So that nothing comes up. They're not, oh, this, that. Just give it to them how it is.
Yeah.
Basically,
So you basically say, what are you folks thinking? Right? Not, what do you think? Right.
Yeah.
You talk to them about the process, right? So Nicole, you've sold a lot, and you've only been, a lot of people think you've been in the business 10 years, but you've only been in the business how long?
I closed my first escrow on October 10th last year.
Right. And you've closed 30 houses since?
My 29th deal next week.
Okay. So what do you do to get people to write?
It's about just having them trust you. So providing a lot of information and education to them.
Same thing he talked about, comparables.
And then just letting them know that I'm advocating for them and providing them comps, telling them, I'll call the listing agent. I'll see how many offers they have in hand so that I can advise you on how to best position your offer. I use the acceleration clause a lot, but I call the listing agent to see if they're open to that. A lot of agents don't even know what that is, or they're like, no, you just come in with your highest and best. So I use the listing agent to gather information from them so that I can advise my client and I just let them know things like, if you don't feel it in your gut that this is your home, if you can't imagine yourself in this home, this is not your property and we'll keep looking. So I let them know that I don't need this deal, to feed my family or to do anything,
You don't make it about you, you make it about them.
It's all about them.
Right. So one of the things that, we have little sayings up on the door that I change every now and then: carry yourself like a champion, be a champion today. One of the things that I've noticed, and you guys could probably hear it in their voices, there's a certain level of confidence that comes through with people that are successful. And it does, and people arrive in terms of success in this industry at different times, right? Not everybody comes out of the chute and writes an offer their first week, Haley, right?
Vince too.
Yeah, Vince
just got here and he just wrote his first offer.
Yep. Yeah.
So,
But you guys carry yourselves a certain way, right? And this is the hard part for me to teach people. I mean, I've had agents that I've brought into business brand new that are in Los Gatos now making $3-4 million a year, right? They didn't all sell a house in the first week, right? A lot of them, it took them a long time to get things going. But what happens is there's a level of confidence that comes through, and there's also certain assumptions that you make. And if you listen to Nicole, she's a giver. Okay. And whether she was in real estate or in insurance, or she's working, still at the county or whatever, she's a giver, right? So it naturally comes out of her that I'm going to call the listing agent. I'm at work. In other words, I'm going to go to work for you like right now, right? With Christian, right? It's more like he gets them through. He's got the comps. He's there, but he assumes the close, right? We talk about in this business, we don't want to assume too much. Like when you do an open house, don't assume that everybody in the world knows how to go through an open house. Tell them that the sellers aren't home. Tell them that they've asked me to tell you to just make yourselves at home and go through. It doesn't mean you can open the bedroom drawers and things, but go through the house, right? So what I wanted Christian to just share with you guys today, so you could get a feel for it, is there's the ability to take some risk, right? Because you can't lose
we've also
something.
talked about too, you can't lose what you don't have.
Cannot lose what you don't have. It's one of my favorites. Go
I just
ahead.
want to make a comment too. It takes practice. I used to do training a lot. But rather than saying things like, I don't know, I'm not sure, I'm new here, or whatever, just focus on what you can do. Let me find out for you. Let me see what we can do for you.
Right.
It makes a world of difference, just those few differences.
It's how you carry yourself. I mean, it's like what we talk about, when somebody says, how long have you been in the business, right? Well, it seems like forever. That's usually enough, right? But on your listing presentations, which, one of my goals for, first quarter of next year is to get everybody to do a great listing presentation, right? That doesn't mean you have to have 46 pages of colored, it just means that you're able to ask certain questions when you go on a listing presentation. One of the things that you have to do is you have to carry yourself like a successful person. Sometimes you fake it until you make it, right? Because the biggest challenge I see with new people is they're so afraid they're going to screw up. And then every now and then I get a Christian, right? Who was almost the opposite, right? He calls me like for 1 week into, he goes, oh, I'm writing my first offer. I'm going to present it. I said, wait. Send it to me first, please, right? And he did, right? And we went through it, and that's what you all of you new people will do is send me the contract. I'll go through it. We're going to go through a mock-up contract here in a second. But I just wanted you to come in and share with everybody so they could see it's possible. I mean, we talk all the time about what doesn't work. Look at Nicole. She's only been in the business a little over a year and she's kicking butt. A lot of people do. I mean, we're very fortunate on our team to have people that have had that success, right? And it's not everybody does. I mean, it's like I say, one of my top agents, a guy named Pete Myers, he's one of the top agents in Los Gatos now. He didn't sell a house for the first 8 months, right? And I mean, he was like, shit, what am I going to do? And I said, well, I know your dad, so I'll call your dad up and have him loan you some money, right? And but no, part of it is just something clicks. But thank you, Christian.
No problem.
Thank you, Nicole. So anyway, Aaron had asked, and it's a great question. What's happening, and the thing you guys have to understand about it, attending this program is we have people at different levels. I have people that just walked in today or yesterday, right? And then I have people that have put a couple deals together, right? And then I've got people that are working on writing their first offers, right? And then Terry's put the deals together. Dylan's obviously put deals together. So what we try to do is we try to take the best of all the worlds that we have and share it with the group, okay? So the thing that happened, and you guys all pull out that listing, it's online now. So what I do, okay, and for those of you that are brand new, I didn't do it. I didn't give it to Lisa. I obviously didn't give it to you. And obviously the people are here for the first time. But what I did on Sunday, I got back from EXP in Las Vegas, and I missed you guys so much that I came in over the weekend. And I sent out, maybe it was Saturday, and I sent out a listing. And I said, write an offer for me, right? Because some of you, I'm sure it was like, what the hell is he talking about? Write an offer. And then we've got people like Lauren who discovered because of this exercise that she wasn't yet able to get into her zip forms, right? We have that happen a lot. If you haven't, once you've joined the board, and you're able to get into your zip forms, make sure you can get into your damn zip forms, right? Because what I don't want to have happen is, what I didn't want to have happen is for Lauren to call me Tuesday night. She's sitting there, she's got her first offer, she's writing up. She goes, I can't get into my zip forms, right? Believe it or not, that happens, right, Terry? It's happened to a lot of people more often than not. So let's talk about this offer. So here's the listing. I just randomly pulled a listing from a certain place. If you look at the information, this is what I sent out to those people. And I'm going to ask everybody to kind of participate to help us all, because there's a lot of information here. So what I said, and this one went to Kelsey. I said, hey, Kelsey, I believe you're up and running with your MLS now, which she is a whole week and a half. So please write a practice offer on this property. I'd like $4,000 back in closing cost. I'll pay full price. I'd like a 30-day COE, close of escrow. I'll pay my standard closing cost, which is a trick question because there's no such thing. In Placer County, all inspection times can be shortened. What do you recommend? And also you'll need to pull the realtor version of this listing because I sent her the client version. Okay, and the reason that I put that in there is because once in a while, somebody will call me and go, well, I got the listing here in front of me, but I can't get all the information. It's because what you'll learn, and the first thing, it's like I told Lisa and I told a lot of you, and Amber, she just walked out. What I tell a lot of you is the first thing you've got to do is the multiple listing service gives everybody those two classes. Number one is the basics, and number two is the advanced. You've got to take that class. Otherwise, you're going to be lost, right? It's how to search for properties, right? How to understand how it works. The next thing is at PCAR, you'll have to take your orientation, which is just your orientation. It's just something they require. It has nothing to do with making any money, but it is the orientation, and you'll have to take it. So here we are. I sent this out, right? And it's a property in Roseville. So does everybody have a copy that I asked the title company to put together of this? Okay, who can tell me what this is? Anybody? Keep
I
it.
couldn't see it, Jeff.
I'm sorry, Sean.
Okay,
Okay, well, I'll keep one here for you on my desk. All right. So
thank you.
yeah, and I'll post it on in Slack. So here's what happens. The reason I did this is last week I'm in Las Vegas and I get a panicked text, and it's one of our agents, and they're going to closing. That the escrow company just called me and wants to know who's going to pay the Placer land trust fee. The problem is, not only is our agent new, but the listing agent, this is her first transaction. Those of you that are experienced, what I tell you is the greatest recipe for disaster in this business is when the listing agent's new, the buyer's agent's new, the lender's new, and the escrow officer just got her job yesterday, right? And this escrow officer knew better. She's been around for a long time. And so we were getting ready to close escrow. And the escrow officer asks our agent, who we have the buyer, who's going to pay the Placer land trust fee? And she said, what's that? Right? There are certain areas in our marketplace that we serve that you guys are going to have to learn and kind of have to memorize to some degree. This document helps you with that. These are the streets. These are the streets. And there's a front and back, by the way. I don't have the back, but they have the back. There's that many streets that carry the Placer Land Trust additional fee, which is 0.5% of the purchase price. For the most part, it varies, but it's just figure it's about 0.5%. Okay, which means if I sell a house in that area, which the average house in that area now is going for $700,000, somebody's going to have to pay $3,500 to have that property transferred. Sun cities have a special transfer tax. They call it a beautification or landscaping, whatever they want to call it. And right now it's put on hold to further complicate and confuse everybody. It's put on hold in Sun City, Lincoln, because they haven't submitted their budget proposal to the city of Lincoln, which is what allows them to charge the $3,000, right? Sun City, Roseville, I think charges $3,000. So what happened in this case is she said, what do I do? And what do you think I said to her? What does the contract say? And she said, it's not addressed. And I said, it might be addressed and you don't know it. Here's what happens. And this is going to be the same on the new purchase agreement. It's just going to be in a different place. It's going to have the same language as the existing residential purchase agreement. There's a place there underneath HOA that simply says other costs, but before it, it says buyer to pay or seller to pay. I said, did you check one of those boxes? And she said, no, it's blank. And I said, oh, this is going to be fun. I said, what's the purchase price? 700. I said, and the fee is 3,500 bucks. And I said, who's the agent on the other side? She told me. I said, okay. It's an agent over at Lyons and the Little Roseville office. So the guy that does a lot of mentoring over there, he's a friend of mine, Steve Carpenter. I call Steve. I said, hey, I think our agent's got a little problem. And so anyway, long story short, she's going to get paid. We're going to close it, but she's going to have $1,750 less on her commission. And the other agent's going to have $1,750 less on her commission. So the reason I'm telling you, and I tell you this way, is so you'll remember West Roseville on these streets off of Fitiment, they carry that special placer land trust fee, $3,500. You sell a house in Sun City, Lincoln, Sun City, Roseville, there's a special transfer fee. Okay. The other thing that I wanted to talk about.
173, this isn't a one-time though, right?
It is a one-time fee.
I thought it went on for like.
No, not the
taxes,
transfer fee. It's only when there's a transfer of the property. Okay. What you're talking about is maybe Melrose or
I
there's
thought this was treated the same as Melrose.
No.
It's not? Okay.
no, it's a one-time transfer fee. So what happened is when the different developers did what they did, they were able to get through Placer County. They said, this is what we'll do. There's other cities in the state, by the way, Saratoga, California has a similar program down in Southern California. God, what is it? Mission Viejo has a similar program where they just basically say, if you want to transfer your property, that's great. We get 30, we get 0.5% of the purchase price. Now think about that for a moment. $3,500 of every property that sells on those streets, 35%, right? It's a lot of money, right? If you're the city, are you going to give that up? You're not, there's no way in hell that you're going to give that up, right? So here's the other thing that came up. What cities in our area have city transfer tax? You know? It's city transfer tax, not county transfer tax. Nicole?
Sacramento.
Davis has it, okay? Every sale you make is going to have county transfer tax. And county transfer tax is $1.10 per thousand, roughly. Sometimes it's a little bit more, but what that does, that $1.10 per thousand does not include is Melrose, okay? So, and again, for some of you guys, Amber's over there thinking, oh shit, I should have stayed home today. The thing that you want to remember is, generally speaking, the newer homes that have been built in the last 20 years, generally speaking, carry Melrose, right? The other thing is they all have HOAs for the most part. And HOAs can go anywhere from $30 a month, I've seen them that low, all the way to $400 a month, right? So Monica had a client that we just closed. They're from San Jose, a little different kind of people. They are adamant. They did not want to have a house with Melrose, and they did not want to have a house with HOA, right? But they wanted a newer house. It's kind of like, I want my cake and I want to eat it too, right? So there are certain areas that we were able to find. So Monica, you sold them a house off of 12 Bridges in Lincoln, right? And what was the Melrose? No. And what was the homeowners association fee? There wasn't. So it's out there. The reason I'm bringing this up to the group and people online also is in our marketplace, because primarily the market here has exploded in the last 15 years. You know, it wasn't that long ago, believe it or not, instead of 55,000 people in Lincoln, there were 10,000, right? There were 10,000 people there forever. Same thing with Roseville. Roseville didn't always have 170,000 people. And so a lot of that growth has happened where, right? West Roseville, right? You don't see a lot of new homes being built out in Granite Bay. They're certainly not building them in Folsom Lake, right? And the same thing when you get on the other side of on the what we call the 50 corridor, you've got Folsom, and there's all those new houses are going to be built. What percentage of those homes do you think are going to carry Melrose?
All of them.
100%.
All of them.
Yeah. What percentage of those homes do you think are going to have an HOA?
All of them.
Pretty much all of them. So one of the things that you want to get good at, and Lauren was a teacher, so she's good at teaching people, right? Is you want to be able to show people that they can actually maybe make a better buy if they buy a slightly older home, right? Because think about this for a second. So every per thousand, as the interest rate goes up, the cost per thousand to borrow money goes like this, right? We're probably never in our, well, maybe in your lifetime, certainly not in mine. We're never going to see interest rates in that 2.5%, 2%. That's just not going to happen. So when the interest rates double, which goes all the way to 4 or 4.5, right? The client is obviously not going to be able to purchase as much as they can now. But the other thing is you have to remember, and this is just kind of a little mind game for you guys to kind of start thinking, you know, one of my favorite sayings, and Nikki likes to quote it all the time, is the most successful people don't get into real estate gets into them, right? So if you think about this, right now, if I'm going to pay an extra $250 or $300 a month, not a year, a month in Melrose, and I'm going to pay another $150 or $200 in an HOA, which is basically $450 to $500. So I'm going to pay that regardless, right? So if I take that $450 and I do the math backwards at 3%, how much more house can I buy in terms of mortgage, right? It's a lot. It's like $80,000, $90,000, right? So most people would probably rather buy more of a home, even though it's slightly older, right? Or you need to do your searches and try and find a house that doesn't carry as much Melrose. Does everybody understand that? Right? So part of why I'm doing this is, and Christian is not there anymore. When Christian first said, what can I say to these people? Because he had people that wanted to buy a brand new house not that long ago. And I said, well, here's the problem with a brand new house. And I said, you're going to have to take your time, take a breath, and educate them as to what the interest rate, at that time, I think it was 2.3, 2.75 interest rate at the time we were talking. And I said, what is the cost per thousand to borrow money at 2.75, right? And do the math backwards. So what he was able to educate the people to is they were better off buying a slightly older home. But here's what they told him, because they had talked to other realtors. Right? It's kind of like the acceleration clause that you guys are talking about. Most people don't even know what the hell it is, right? They told him, you know, nobody else has ever told us this. You know, we've been looking for a house for several months. The guy's brand new. This is like his first sale, right? And he looks like he's 12, right? And they're trusting their biggest sale with him because he's educating them on certain things, right? So part of what you have to do is you kind of have to look at, when you're talking to people, you become a trusted advisor, you become a consultant of sorts, right? You don't just throw them into a house and never see them again, right? You want to talk about the pluses and minuses. It's nice to buy a new home, right? It's wonderful to buy a new home, but new homes in our area carry a certain cost. Not all new homes. You can go out and buy, she's got a great listing. I don't even know if there's Melrose on that house. When it's built, I don't think there is HOA because it's in Serrano, right? But most new homes, most of the, the things that we're seeing out in West Roseville, Lincoln, the new ones in Rockland, and there's not many, Rockland's almost done. I mean, there's not much space there until I guess they can go out to the casino. But those houses all carry Melrose. Okay, so back to the contract. So I send this, let's see, where's my worksheet here? What did I do with that piece of paper? Did I give it to you? Okay, so Kelsey, you're going to get to be the guinea pig. Give Kelsey a break. She's been in the business a whole week and a half, 2 weeks. So I sent it to Kelsey. And and you guys will hear me say this corny thing because I like to embarrass my son. What warmed the cockles of my heart on this is Kelsey actually responded back with questions. And they weren't, because there is no dumb question, but they were really good questions. Like, is that an adequate deposit? Because look what I said. I said, I believe you're up and running. So please write a practice offer on this property. Many of you sitting around the table got the same thing. I'd like a $4,000 back in closing costs. I'll pay full price. I'd like a 30-day COA. I'll pay my standard closing cost in Placer County. All inspection times can be shortened. What do you recommend? Right? And so there's a lot of practice in there, and there's some real world stuff. So what she asked, or actually Rick asked, is where do I put the 4,000? A lot of you put it on page number 2. Okay. Some of you actually put it on page number 1, right? Which is under additional financing terms, right? You can put in there buyer to sellers to credit, buyer $4,000 towards closing costs, which brings up a point of discussion. There's 2 types of closing costs. There's recurring, which is the proration of taxes and that type of thing, because recurring, right? And then there's non-recurring, the one time only when you purchase a property, title insurance, escrow fees, that type of thing. Most lenders don't make you define where the credit's going to come from anymore. We had one 2 weeks ago that did, because what lenders will do is they'll allow the seller to credit money to the buyer towards non-recurring closing costs, but they won't always allow them to credit it towards recurring closing costs. Okay, so non-recurring closing costs are, again, title insurance. In California, if they wanted to pay the brokerage fee, nobody ever does, but they can. Things that only pertain to the purchase, right? So where does the Placer Land Trust fee fall? The $3,500. There's a $4,000 credit. Is this property in the Placer Land Trust? It's not. That's why I picked it. Okay. It's not. It's a little bit older. Okay. What else do you need to know if you're going to write an offer for somebody in Roseville? What are some things people like to know? For those of you that live in Roseville, is being a part of Roseville Utilities a good thing?
Yes.
Yes.
Is it like a friggin' huge thing?
Yes.
Right. Is this property in Roseville Utilities or PG&E or some SMUD? It's in Roseville. Is that and we've all agreed that that's a great thing, right? How do you find those things out? You can call the listing agent, right? And a lot of times, like Nicole said, I try not to be that way. I think most great agents remember different markets. I always take calls from people. I always try to help them. I always try to answer the question. Not everybody, some certain agents, they get a little uppity, like, when this is my 3rd listing, I don't need to talk to a lowly buyer's agent. But if they want to make a good sale, they find certain things out, right? So if you're the listing agent on this house, is that something you should know? Yeah, adds a lot of value. I mean, a tremendous amount of value, to a point where people that live in the Roseville, what's it called? Roseville Utilities now, right? What's it?
City of Roseville.
City of Roseville,
Yeah.
right? A lot of those people have trouble trying to justify putting solar on their house, right? Because the damn power is so cheap, right? It's a really big deal. So that's a selling point, right? This house here is in the city of Roseville. That's a nice thing. So Dylan, who's an experienced agent now, has sold several properties. He would have done his homework, and he would have said, by the way, why this property is a little something extra about this property. It falls into the city of Roseville's utilities. That's about a 30 or 40%, sometimes reduction in your expense, right? It's big. It makes a big difference. Let's try and find you a property in the Roseville utilities, right? So what else do we want to know about this property? Look at the listing. What's that?
School district.
School districts. How do we find out about the school districts? A listing agent, or believe it or not, you can actually call the school district and give them you can give them the address and they will tell you, right? Oh, that falls into, Fairbook schools or whatever, right? You can do that type of thing. Here's the problem. The problem is things are happening so fast now. The normal things that we used to do to help people make the right decision get left behind, right? So it's kind of like you gotta hyper educate yourself on, okay, wait a second, this thing's off of Fittiman. Oh my God, it might have that Placer land trust thing, right? There's certain things you got to know. And Mallarus, how do you find out, Dylan, if there's Mallarus on a property? What do you do? Property profile, or you can go into the MLS and find out if it's there, right? So here's what I want to recommend, and Dylan was an A student, still is. Before you write a property, if you can, or before you list a property for sure, it costs you not 1 cent to pull a property profile from your most favorite company. Like the company I sent out here is Old Republic, so we used at the old place. They actually have an app. Fidelity has an app. A lot of these places have apps. One of the things I'm going to do is ask 1 or 2 of them to come by and do a little class for you guys, right? So that you can put the app on your phone. It'll figure out closing costs for you. It'll do a lot of things like that. But it'll also, what happens is you can get in and you can pull the property, the tax record. And Dylan, how does it indicate on a property if it has Mallarus? What does it say? MR. Yep. MR. Mallarus, right? So here's the thing that you guys have to remember. Somebody will tell you, hey, Amber, don't worry, the Mallarus, it was on for 20 years and we've had the house for 12. It expires in 8. Is that a true statement? No, not always, right? The city has the option to extend, right? How many cities in the state of California do you think say, hey, you know what, we're doing pretty good, we don't need any money, right? None, right? So Mallarus continues on with the property for a long period of time. So here's what's going to happen. Lauren's going to go over to Lincoln Crossing. Lincoln Crossing, Lincoln Crossing is like, I don't know, 6,000 homes. It's huge, right? And Lincoln. What's the other name for Lincoln Crossing? Mallarus City, right? And the reason being is it carries huge Mallarus there, $300, $400 a month, right? And how they got that through, I don't know. But what's going to happen? You're going to sell a house. And the next door neighbor is going to come in and tell the person who bought the house, they're going to be talking, they're going to become friends. Oh yeah, our Mallarus is only $150 a month, right? And your buyer is going to say, why is mine $400 a month, right? What's the answer? It was all put in place when the builder built the properties out. It was based on square footage, okay? And proposed value. Right. So what I tell people to do, because when I first moved back up here in 16 from Newport Beach, and if you want to know why somebody moves from Newport Beach to Lincoln, California, it's called grandchildren. Otherwise, I'd still be living in Newport Beach. Have you ever been to Newport Beach? It's friggin' nice. But anyway, I'm just joking. All my friends from Lincoln. The thing to remember about Mallarus is that it doesn't drop off. You can look it up on the MLS, right? Or if you take a listing, what you're going to do, right? You want to do some research so that you can put a package together. And what should your package be on your first listing? What do you always want to include in today's world that we didn't always include before? Let me give you a story and it'll help you. So Nikki Tanner, who's one of our top agents, wrote an offer, nice property, $2.5 million property. And the listing agent is insistent upon them removing all contingencies. The loan contingency, the appraisal, and the inspection contingency, okay? It's a nice piece of property, but the house was built in 95, okay? So there's 2 schools of thought. There are some agents that say that makes a lot of sense, right? That way we know for sure we have a solid buyer. And then there's people like me who truly believe that 3 or 4 years from now, the best thing to be in our area in the state of California is a real estate attorney, because the lawsuits that are going to occur for non-disclosure are going to be a mountain high, right? So I think And I had an offer on a property that I just sold in a little house in Lincoln. They were going to do no inspections. I said, no. My aunt wants you to do inspections. It's my aunt's house, right? And they said, that's different. Why would she want inspections done? I said, because the house was built in 1935. Her dad built the house, right? Not much has been done to it since then. There is no way that my 94-year-old aunt can properly disclose everything that's going on with this property. We want you to have a property inspection. We want you to have a termite inspection. The fact that you're going to have a plumber come out is awesome, right? The fact that you're actually going to get the sewer line inspected, that's awesome. Why? Why did I tell the agent that actually got the offer? Why did I tell her that? I want to protect my, not she's my client, but she's also my aunt, right? Because what 90% of the lawsuits that are occurring in California right now, according to an attorney friend of mine, are what? Non-disclosure, right? I mean, our contract's pretty, everything's there. I mean, you usually don't have a lawsuit because you misrepresented a number on the page or whatever. The lawsuits occur around non-disclosure. How do you better protect your seller against a suit for non-disclosure versus not, giving them an inspection, right? So one of the things that we tell people all the time, when you're going to take a listing, Dylan, pull a property profile, see if you can get the seller to do inspections, right? So that they can deliver them. But here's the point of this, right? All the way back to Nikki. Nikki was an A student when she came through. What and who oversees the transfer disclosure law in California? Did the California Association of Realtors write that contract? Or did the state legislators write that contract, that agreement, that disclosure? The disclosure, the TDS, if you were to talk to a car attorney, they'll tell you it's not a part of the purchase agreement. It's a disclosure, okay? But we treat it as a part of the purchase agreement. In the purchase agreement, it says that the TDS, which is the transfer disclosure, the SPQ, right? Yes, it's a little different because the SPQ was actually created by CR. The TDS was created by the state legislators, right? It's actually, they wrote it, they gave it. We have to give it to everybody. Every transfer of every property has to have a TDS along with an agency agreement, right? So the TDS, if you remember for my A students, right? Chanel's like, I know. So what is the timeline? Nikki said, if they accept this and they're gonna go through the house tomorrow and they accept it, can they still use the TDS to get out of the agreement? What's the answer? There's another question. I said, when did you get the TDS? And she said, she hasn't given it to me yet. How do most people deliver all the documents today? Electronically. So when we go through the RPA, the residential purchase agreement, and some of you have been through it several times at this point, right? Right, Dylan? Right? What does it say in the contract? And what did the state legislators determine to be adequate amount of time for the buyer to review the disclosure? It's 3 days if hand delivered, and it's 5 days if electronically delivered. Electronic is email, right? So how do you think most people deliver the TDS today? Electronically, right? They just send it over on a PDF, right? And it comes. So what does that give the buyer? 5 days to review it. So the next question I always get is, okay, they've changed their mind now. They don't want to buy it, but they removed all the contingencies. And what's that thing you said about the TDS, right? What did I tell Nikki? What do you write down as the reason if you're going to use the TDS to cancel the agreement? And it's happening every day in our business right now. I don't like it, but it's happening. And that's why we're talking about it.
You don't write a reason.
You do not write a reason. You simply write down Mr. and Mrs. Buyer are in receipt of the transfer, are in receipt of the transfer disclosure, they hereby cancel the agreement. Period. Done. Not because the ceiling is tile instead of, shake, nothing, just that simple. Matter of fact, if you give a reason, there's one argument that then you create an opportunity for the seller to remedy the problem, right? You don't write a reason, okay? So when you take your first listing and when you guys look at the listings, and a lot of you guys are looking at them, so let's look at this one, look up in the corner there, okay? This is a very basic version of the listing, right? There's another version. This is a summary. There's a summary. There's an agent full. There's an agent with 40 pictures, and there's an agent with all the pictures. That's the 4 different versions you can pull down, and you guys will learn all this stuff, right? The full version, when you're looking at it online, and this is a question I was waiting for you to ask, but you didn't. But that's okay. You've only been in the business a week and a half. There's a little paper clip up there. Okay. And what is that paper clip for, Nicole? Huh? It's attachments, all the attachments. Let's say you had a termite report, a property inspection, you had the sewer inspected. If it's out in the country, you had a septic, you had the septic done. You had, you had a perk test. You had all kinds of things. But here's what people are forgetting to put there. This agent is representing somebody on a $2.5 million piece of property, wants everything removed, but he didn't yet give them the TDS and it's not attached to the listing. Is that very smart? No. Why not attach the TDS and the SBQ? And in the private remarks that go out to the agents, which are basically agent remarks, and you guys learn all that's another reason I put this out here. It only shows the public remarks. You can see the private remarks up top, right there. Do not show it. Do not use showing time. This is one of Brian's listings, so he doesn't like showing time, which is great. But in those private remarks, you can write, please have your clients read, review, and execute the TDS when submitting their offer. Can you do that?
Yeah.
Is that legal?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if I'm that agent, what should I be more concerned with rather than them just because it's not, remember when the agent comes back, eliminating all the contingencies, who's really coming back, removing all the contingencies? The seller, right? So the seller is saying to the buyer, we want you to buy this house, no contingencies. By the way, you don't have an inspection contingency, right? And we'll get you the TDS when we get it to you, right? So if you're Nikki now, and she talks to her buyer, she explains to her buyer, as soon as we get the TDS, we have 3 days to review it if they hand deliver, which they never do, 5 days if it's electronically delivered, right? So here's the next question I get. And it addresses this in the contract very clearly. If I remove the inspection contingency, can my clients still do inspections? Some of my A students remember, right? Yes. The contract says it, that the buyer always has a right to continue inspections, right? It's kind of like, and this is kind of off the subject, but it's good for you guys to remember. I like to touch on different things. You will use a contingent offer form. What's going to happen is your friends in Colfax, they're going to want you to find them a house in Loomis. It's going to be contingent upon the sale of their home, right? That form is either contingent upon the sale of their home, or it's also used at the same, in a different instance, it's contingent upon the close of their home, right? But in that contract, what it has is it gives the contingent upon the sale of, it gives the buyer the right to continue to look for homes, but the seller also responds back, and this is the reason I'm bringing it up. It just happened last week. On the bottom of the new contingent offer form, it's now 2 pages. You have to select one of 3 options. Either if the seller gets another offer, they can kick you out, right? The seller has to give you what we used to call a 72-hour notice. Now it's called a 3-day notice, or nothing can happen for the term of the requested, which is up in number 1 on that form, of the length of period for the buyer to sell their house, which is 21 days, right? So here's the problem. What I wanted to talk about is on that. What it doesn't talk about is the TDS. It doesn't talk about the SBQ, and it doesn't talk about the contingency removals at all. What it does talk about in the contingent offer form, this just happened, is there's two different decisions to make now. Number one, when does the timeline start? I have a listing. Let's use you. Okay. Her clients bring an offer in on Lauren's listing and they're moving from Colfax. They want to buy your listing in Roseville. They haven't yet sold their home, right? The offer comes in and Amber looks at it. She calls me up and I say to Amber, I say, well, what are they at?
God.
In length, in length of time to sell their home? Do they have a 72-hour notice in the form? And does your client have a first right of refusal? There's a lot of different things in the form, right? We're going to review the form probably in 3 weeks. But here's what I wanted to make sure that I touched on is the timelines on that, where you have to decide with your client. They either start the day the offer gets accepted, or they start when your property in Colfax goes into escrow. That's the timeline. What happened in this situation with one of our agents is it was an older agent, good agent, in Roseville, didn't know that the form had changed because it used to tie in the deposit and all the other timelines in one sentence. Now it breaks it into 2 different sentences. The deposit is a different paragraph versus the normal timelines, right? So in other words, in essence, you could put the deposit in now, but the timelines, which is basically the time to do inspections, doesn't start until you notify her that your house is in escrow, right? And once you notify her, that's when the timelines start. So we come all the way back to this property here, right? We're talking about notifications. What just cracks me up is how many agents, and this isn't a 2.5, I mean, who's gonna, you get a $2.5 million listing, you kind of need to know what you're doing, right? And so this agent is saying, they're adamant, we want all the contingencies removed, right? But by the way, the house was built in 95, right? So I'm talking to Nikki about it, and I said, Nick, first of all, I mean, if it's me, I want you to have inspections, right? I said, do they have any inspections that they're providing? She said, no, they don't have anything. I said, what did they attach to it? She said, they didn't attach anything on a $2.5 million house, right? So the TDS, the transfer disclosure, can always be used to get out of a transaction. The reason I'm bringing this up, sure is I'm sitting here, Lauren's going to call me up in 2 weeks. And she said, I'm working with this client. They told me that their friend told them, whose cousin did this in San Jose, that they wrote 3 offers on 3 different properties, hoping to get one, and they removed all the contingencies. And what happens if all 3 offers get accepted, right? Well, the problem with that, of course, is, and first of all, it's not good business, but because you got a seller, you got 3 sellers who think, they had 2 other offers, but they chose yours. It's just, it's almost too much of a good thing in this market right now. I mean, it's just crazy, right? But what happens, and what I'll tell Lauren, I'll say, Lauren, remember we sat in the little room there and we talked about this. Your buyer will have to use the TDS to get out on the 2 houses that they like the least. That's what they're going to have to do, right? So again, I don't like to really talk a lot about that because I'm not a big fan of that, but it's happening every day. And what happened with Nikki is because she didn't want to lose the house, she went back to the clients. It's not us that makes the decision. Who makes the decision? Our clients, right? We try to guide them. We try to give them the benefit of our knowledge, but it's their decision. And so she went back to the guy, and what do you think he said? So I got 5 days. She said, unless they hand deliver me the TDS, she goes, I still don't have it. Is that a good way to do business? No, it's not a good way to do business. It's the market that we're in right now. This market will change. I guarantee you this market will change. Listing agents will be calling you up, begging you to show their listings, right? We're not in that market right now. All right. So back to this. I know we jump around a lot, but little tidbits, it'll stay in your head. I promise you, right, Dylan? These little things stay there. So let's go back to, let's see here. Kelsey, you're still up. So Kelsey, when you get this from a client, this thing I sent you, okay? And the client, so she goes out, she shows them the house, they like it. She says, what are you folks thinking, right? And then what she might have also wanted to do when she read their body language is she might have wanted to say, hey, what we normally do next is, right? Let me run some comparables for you. I can tell you like the home. If the value seems to be there, I recommend, you come in with your best offer. If you don't get it, you don't get it, because the market's pretty crazy right now. But I can tell you this, houses like this, because this is a true statement, that you like this much, as we know, because we've been looking around, don't come up that often. We should at least make an effort to get you this home, right? A lot of people say, do you really say that? And I say, yeah, because I'm not attached to the outcome. You heard Christian say that, right? That's the first thing I told him when I was trying to write it. I said, listen, you cannot be attached to the outcome. All you can do is your best, right? And if they tell you, I'm not buying a house from you, I mean, you're too tall, right? Whatever they say, there's only so much. I mean, she had a client that started working with her because she said she's prettier than the other agent they had, and the other agent was Christian. No, I'm just kidding. That worked. Did it work out, Haley?
I was still seeing homes.
Yeah, there you go. So you never know, right? Crazy shit happens.
Yeah.
But so Kelsey, okay. And I know you're so new, but you did a great job writing that up. How did you, after only like one class, how did you figure out how to write that offer? What did you look at? What did you use as a?
Finally got onto the form. I was watching videos over and over again.
And all the new people, I tell you guys all the time that there's, I mean, I wish I would have had those back in 1987. It would save me a lot of time, right? There's a lot you can learn on YouTube, right? There's a ton you can learn on YouTube. Even how to write a counter offer, how to take a listing, how to present a listing. There's a lot of things there. So you dug into it and you asked me, is that, is that a good deposit, right? And what did Christian say about the EMD, which is another way what we call a deposit? Between 1% and 3%. Yeah. So if you can get people to write 2% deposit, is that a good thing? Right. So I'm going to ask the seller to pay $4,000 of my closing cost, and I'm going to pay full price. What's another thing? If you're Amber, you're representing me now. What should you be doing while this is all going on if you can? Remember what Nicole said. Don't be afraid to pick up the agent, right? The phone, right, Monica, Nicole, and call them on the other side, right? Number one, you'll find out what kind of agent it is. And number two, if they're worth their salt, they'll try to help put the deal together. Because my job, if I'm representing the seller, what's my job? My first job is to get people through the front door. My second job is to get my clients the highest and best offer I can. And how do we do that in our business? We create what we call the auction environment. You ever been to an auction? Right? You go to an auction and you sell this watch, right? If there's one person there, I'm going to get X. If there's 40 people that want my watch, I'm probably going to get a hell of a lot more than X, right? So my job is to get people through the front door. But my second job is to try and get as many offers as I can for my clients, right? Because what am I trying to do? Trying to give them the most money I can get them in the best terms, right? So if I'm not responding to Joe Blow at Century 21 and Mary Smith at Red Carpet, if I'm not responding to their questions, am I really doing a good job? No, right?
I also find when there's a competitive listing, by reaching out to the listing agent, I try to build a rapport with that agent and try and connect with the agent like I connect with my clients, so that if it's a close call, they'll leave the seller to select my offer because they find me easy to work with.
Yep. All those, I mean, it's not supposed to work that way. It's kind of like people ask me about the Zillow. When we were in EXP, it's like, how did you guys, get in the Zillow thing? They said, well, the way the world is supposed to work and the way the world really works is two different things. The fact that my son worked at Zillow for 7.5 years probably helped us a lot, right? Because it's who you know, not necessarily what you know, right? So what Nicole just said, right, is if you start conversing with somebody and everything else being equal, why wouldn't they want to at least counter your offer, right? What else comes out in that conversation? What else can come out? Are you legally entitled as a listing agent to share with the buyer's agents what your highest offer is so far? Changed this law about 3 years ago. If the seller gives you permission, right? We used to say, no, we can't tell you. I mean, I'm not crossing that line. But somebody finally figured out, well, how does that protect the seller? It doesn't, right? If the house is listed at 600 and the highest offer so far is 650. Why not tell anybody? And then all of a sudden you get a bunch of 610s and 615s. Why not say, hey, I just want you to know the seller has authorized me to share with you right now in front of me in hand. I have a $650,000 offer, right? And is that doing a disservice to the seller? Hell no, right? We're trying to get the seller the most money we can get them, right? So go back to looking at this listing. Just look at the listing, just like Kelsey did. Okay. It's listed at $720. One of the reasons I selected this property is go down to where it says original price. How many properties do you think in our marketplace right now are having their prices reduced?
None.
I mean, come on, this is crazy, right? Not many at all. So what does that tell you about this property?
It's overpriced. And there's something wrong with it. It's been on the market 76 days. Like that doesn't happen either.
Right. So the reason I brought this up is, you guys, we cannot get caught up in this euphoria that's going on in the market where we think every house that's priced at a certain price is worth that amount, right? So what do we need to do still today that we've done for years? Christian covered it. Nicole talked about it. What do we do? Run some comparables. See what's, not only what's sold, but what's for sale. How do you run comparables?
You can run
On MLS, pretty simple,
or you can
right?
You can do a search.
You do a search.
Uh-huh.
So are all comparables in this hot market on MLS? Are private sales where Mary Sue sells to her friend at school, from school, her house in Roseville? Does that show up on MLS? No. How do you find those sales? The property profile that costs you nothing. So what you're going to do, Kelsey, before you take your first listing, is you're going to call whichever one of these title reps that you decide that you want to work with that you like. And you're going to either go online, which most people do now, or you can have them run it for you and email it to you, a property profile, not a title report, a property profile. The property profile will have the square footage of the home, when it was built, the current taxes, right? It'll also, and it depends on who you get it from, but most of them do the same thing. It'll have recent closed sales. Is there a chance in the hot market we're in right now that if you get 10, if there's 10 comparables on the MLS and it's a house in Roseville and you get the property profile, is there a chance there might be 12 comparables? Right, there's 2 houses that might have sold privately, right? So you're going to use that on your listing presentation when you go out, right? But you also are going to use, there's Cloud CMA, there's all these different programs that are available to us because we're members of MLS and PCAR, right? It's all out there, tools to demonstrate kind of what we do. But what happens when Lauren goes out on her first listing presentation and she forgot to pull the property profile because she didn't know that the people that lived across the street that sold their house and closed a month ago to their cousin, but they sold it for a really good price, is the seller's best friend. And she shows up with her comps that she pulled from MLS, but she doesn't have the lady across the street. And they probably don't say anything. I follow up on my listing presentation and I have the house from across the street. That was the private sale. Do I look more prepared or does Lauren look more prepared? Yeah. Right. So the reason I tell people, and I didn't always do it starting about, when I was still selling back in San Jose, the property profile wasn't as complete as it is today, and it was a little harder to get, but it was also a package of information that I could take out to the seller. What I usually would do with a property profile is I put it in my pre-listing presentation, right? The pre-listing presentation has my resume. It has a little bit about the team. It has a little bit about what's going on in the marketplace. It has the property profile. It looks like I did a ton of homework, right? And in reality, pretty much everything's done other than running the most current comps. Okay, so let's go back here. How much time we have? We have a little bit of time. Okay, so we know that this property's been on the market for a long time, right? How many properties out there on today's market have been on the market for 76 days?
Almost none.
Right? Right. So, and the guy that has this, he's a pretty cool guy, Brian. So would it be rude to call Brian and say, hey, how come the house hasn't sold? It's on the market for 76 days.
I see you've got a price decrease.
Yeah.
I see it's been on the market 76.
What the hell?
What's up?
Yeah,
What
you know,
I
do you
need to
have like a
know?
sinkhole in the back or what,
I need to
right?
know.
And the reason that I'm reiterating that is what happens is, and Lauren, this, I'll use you example because you're not this way, you know, is we come in the business and we're so intimidated by what I don't know, is we don't use what we do know. And what we do know is there's nothing wrong with calling Brian up and saying, hey, what the hell? You know, what's going on here? You know, because if I'm Brian and my listing's been up for 76 days and I've had to reduce the price, I'm gonna, if you're a brand new, I mean, I'll help you write the contract, right? If you've got a good buyer on my property. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but pretty much, right? So what else about this listing? Let's look at this listing. What else do we know about this listing? It was built in 1990. The houses in 1990 have a lot of Melrose.
No.
That's a good thing, right? What else? What school district is it in? Is that a good school district? So if you had the listing, would you be kind of selling that in your remarks? What else could they have done more on this? And Brian's a good agent, by the way. I'm not saying he's not a good agent. I've known him for years. We get busy though. Everybody gets busy.
The accessibility to stores and shopping, coffee shops.
Stuff like
and
that.
all that.
Right. So is there a lot of growth happening around this property? Right. Is that a good thing to know? Right. Is there a new high school down the street from this place?
Mhm.
Is there a new Safeway going in on the corner down the street from this place?
No, it's
But where?
down
Off of
the-
Fitterman?
Down off
Yeah.
Fitterman.
Right. So are those things that matter when you're showing buyers homes, right? When you're able to share those
Growth and
type
opportunity.
of details. And this is what I tell you guys when you come in, people, when Jennifer and I were selling a lot of houses, we were just talking to Kobe about this the other night. When Kobe and Caitlin were in school, we sold a ton of real estate to their friends' parents, right? So it's nice, but we also knew everything about the schools in Almaden Valley. Our kids went to country school, which is a private school, but we knew all the schools. We knew everything. We knew about the high schools. We knew everything. I don't know as much about it now, right? But if you know that, you got to, you want to be able to share that with people when you're talking to them. What else about this property? It's 2,300 square feet and it's selling, and they're asking $311 a square foot. All right. How can you do a quick comparable to see how that compares to other properties in the area? And square footage is not always a good indicator, right? Because what if this house is on a little baby lot and you can't, there's no backyard, and other house that sold for $320 a square foot was a huge cul-de-sac lot, got a pool. I mean, it's huge, right? So you can't always just use cost per square foot. But you should be able to, when you pull your comparables, what I do with my comparables is I pull it like this, and on the bottom, I have a little space for summary, and I write the cost per square footage, when it was built, if it has a pool, those types of things, the kitchen was remodeled, things like that, right? I make notes, and that's what I give to my client. Why? I'm doing my homework, right? I'm doing my homework. So what else? What else do we have here that we should know about? Not much, right? Because if you want to know more, you have to not run the summary, you have to run the full version, right? And the full version. Yeah, but so there are no reports on this. I don't have a termite, after 70 some days, you think there'd be a termite report, property inspection, the TDS would be attached, the SPQ would be
Do
attached.
something to try to sell it.
Right, there'd be
Right?
something there, right? So here's what I want you guys to work on. So we jump around a lot. When you take the back of your mind, when you take your listings and you're going out before you go out and talk to people and you run there's the story and then there's the story behind the story, right? And this is what Lauren's writing things down. You guys write this down. You want to be a really good agent and you want to excel in this business. know the difference between properties and addresses. When I was running Call a Banker, my top agent, she's top agent in the world, a good friend, Jade Mills, just a great lady. She's the #1 agent in the world for Call a Banker, works Beverly Hills. I asked her one time, I said, Jade, what's the difference between an $18.5 million house in Beverly Hills and a $19.5 million house? I had no, I was genuinely asking her because I have no friggin' idea, right? And she said, well, there's this, and that, and blah, blah, blah. And she said, and I said, well, when you go on your listing presentations, because she obviously does a lot. This is right after we got the spelling mansion, right? And actually, Sally got that one, not Jade, but Sally's very similar to Jade. I said, what do you think separates you from everybody else? Because, she grew up in Pleasanton. She went to Hollywood to become a movie star because she looks like a movie star. Like a lot of them, it didn't work out. So she became a waitress at a bar, right? And then she got into real estate and now she makes $7 million a year. I said, what do you think is the difference between you and everybody else? And she said, a lot of people still go out and talk about addresses. I talk about properties. She said, I spend so much time staying up with what's going on in the market. And this, of course, Beverly Hills, it's a smaller market, right? But you could know it in Granite Bay. You could know it in El Dorado Hills. You could know it in some specific markets. You could know it in Auburn. You could know it in some specific markets. She goes, every time I'm on a listing presentation, when I'm talking about comparables, I try to bring in what the property that's sold and how it compares. I'll try to bring in the fact who owned it, not just now, but the people prior to them. I like to talk about what they did to the property. I talk about the kitchen being updated when it was updated, right? I talk about the interior style of the home, right? How in our world do we do that? It's hard. It's really, really hard. But in certain marketplaces, if you say, you know what, I'm going to focus on East Roseville, Granite Bay, right? But when properties come up and you're out showing them, keep in the back of your mind, because that's going to become a comparable at some point. Where it really comes in, and one of my goals for the quarter of next year is to get some of you at least to start geographically farming areas. Because when you geographically farm an area, you need to know everything about that specific area, right? You need to know the schools really well. Hell, you need to know who the principal is. You need to know how far it is to the store. You need to know those things, right? So from Jade Mills, the #1 agent in the world, maybe worldwide, she's in the top 10 for sure. She said the difference, she said, Jeff, what I would tell your new agents is try to know the difference between addresses and properties. Anybody can talk about addresses. And talking about an address is you're on a listing presentation and you're going 1275 Jackson Street. You could see it's very similar to house. It was 2,150 square feet, 4 bedrooms, 2 baths. It says right here that it had a remodeled kitchen and, it looks like a nice house. The backyard's a little smaller versus did you happen to see the house at 2147 Jackson Drive when it was on the market? Pretty nice house. Not only did they remodel the kitchen, but they really remodeled the kitchen. And one of the things, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, a lot of people don't know, there's a big difference between a $20,000 remodel on the kitchen versus a $120,000 remodel on the kitchen. This house has a $120,000 remodel, right? And I think that's what kind of sold the house for as much as it did. Now, the challenge though is the backyard was a little bit smaller. As we compare that house to yours, your house is nice. You remodeled a lot of it. They probably went overboard on their house. We need to sell in your house is basically your backyard. Nobody else in this development has a backyard like yours. And then they usually say, it's funny, that's kind of why we bought it. Right. So there's little things that you want to remember when you're on your listing presentations that you want to bring up. So finishing with Kelsey, she writes the offer. I think you originally put the $4,000 on page number 2. Was that you? That might have been one of the other, Rich. Okay. We put it on, that's okay. Because here's the point. The California Association of Realtors Residential Purchase Agreement is what? It's a contract written by a trade organization. Is it the gospel? No. If you write something in the contract and it's handwritten or it's put in after the pre-printed portion, does it still stand? Yes. Doesn't matter where the hell you put it, right? It's just good to put financing terms on page number 1. The new contract is going to eliminate a lot of that concern for us, okay? So the other thing that came up, Kelsey, is I said, I'll pay standard closing costs.
Mhm.
You'll hear that from experienced agents from time to time. What are standard closing costs in Placer County? Technically, there's no such thing,
Whatever
Right.
negotiated.
but when you go through the contract, and there's this thing called RESPA, Real Estate Securities Protection Act, right? It says the person who pays for it generally gets to pick the provider. So prior to this crazy market that we're in right now, Nicole, right? Never a problem. Who paid the seller's CLTA? The seller. But now all of a sudden, in order to make our offers better, we're seeing buyers willing to split it, buyers willing to pay for it, which I think is not a good thing if you're trying to negotiate on behalf of your buyer, because it gets lost in the discussion. If you're going to go ahead and pay an extra $2,000 towards the seller's closing cost, add it to the purchase price, because that way it's big and bold. If you just bury it in there, it's like, okay, well, they're going to pay that. Big deal, right? We got 3 other offers. So the CLTA, which is the seller's closing costs, the escrow fee, which is also selected. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to have somebody from Southern California come up and write an offer. And what you're not going to know, because you're from Northern California, is in Southern California, the title company is separate from the escrow company. They're 2 different entities, right? Up here, everything is housed under the same roof, right? If you choose Cornerstone, if you choose Fidelity, if you choose Old Republic, they do both up here. The problem with that, and this is something for you to remember to share with your Southern California buyers, is because they do it separately in Southern California, the escrow fee in Southern California is almost twice as much as the escrow fee is in Northern California. And the line's just where it kind of separates is kind of down below Carmel, down in that area down there where it switches, right? So just kind of keep that in mind. So the other thing that comes up on your contract, right, is standard, in terms of standard cost, is who pays for retrofit? Retrofit. Okay, it's a trick question. It's a trick question. The contract still addresses retrofit on page number 3 on page number 2 on the bottom. Retrofit only exists in 3 cities in the state of California that I know. Davis, of course, Berkeley, of course, and the city of Bell, right? And what retrofit is, when we were selling houses back in the last drought in the 90s and early 2000s, we required it was a state requirement, then became a city requirement because the drought is you had to put low pressure shower heads, right? You had to put toilets that could only hold 2.5 gallons of water, right? There was a bunch of things that you literally had to do in order to transfer title, right? That all went away. The problem is the RPA, the California Association of Realtors RPA, is written for the whole state. It's not just written for Placer County, right? So they have this big blanket contract because the city of Bell, the city of Berkeley, and the city of Davis still have retrofit. So Wendy over there, she's always been a nice student. She calls me up one day. She goes, "I might an offer." There she is right there. She says, "Was it a listing you had in Davis or a buyer?" And so what happens on the retrofit in Davis? Yep.
And then they check the permit. So if it's something that's updated and not permitted, then you can't sell it until everything that they call out.
Right. So when she called me and told me she was working with a buyer in Davis, I said, "Don't they like Woodland?" Because it's a pain in the butt, right? And the sellers who live in Davis, who sold their house in, Temecula or whatever before they bought the house in Davis, they don't understand why they have to go through all this dog and pony, because who has to pay for it? Right. And so let's just say that the inspector comes out and there's things that have to be fixed. What has to happen? A reinspection fee, right? So if you sell a house in the city of Davis, not only do you have to do all these things, but you could have another $500 or $600 in inspection fees, right? So remember we talked about Melrose. What's the likelihood of anybody sitting around this table selling a house in Davis? When I first started talking to her, I didn't think she'd ever sell a house in Davis, right? But just kind of keep that in mind. so there's a lot of little things that come up. So we're running out of time. And I promise I try to keep you guys here for no more than an hour and a half. So here's what I'd like you guys to do before next Wednesday is continue looking at those YouTube videos. Great job, by the way, on your contract. I mean, for somebody who's been here for a whole week, it was like, I looked at yours and Aaron's and everybody else's, and it was like, shit, these people are paying attention, you know, so congratulations. And then Rich, I know you're on yours. We talked about yours. You did a great job, Shoni. I think I sent it out to like 7 people, and I got to tell you, it really warmed the cockles of my heart, seeing how good you guys all did. So anyway, so before next week, you know, get in, continue to look at RPA. I know a lot of it is like, I was talking to Lisa before the class, and she said some of these people that do these YouTube videos shouldn't be doing YouTube videos. I know. Pick and choose, find the ones that, you know, seem to be, the guy that does a good job, he's from Balboa Realty down in Newport Beach. He does a pretty good job on he does a lot of videos. And I actually watched a couple of them. He does a pretty good job. But anyway, thank you all for being here. And we'll just keep writing contracts. And don't forget, when you write your first one, I mean, Monica, Dylan, you know, Dylan's had several contracts. He still calls me up and says, hey, can you check this out? And what do I always say, Dylan?
Send it over.
Send it over, right? Because I'd rather look at it now than. Right, Cameron? Yeah, I'm surprised Cameron still doesn't send them. He's only sold about 150 houses, but all right, guys. Well, thank you very much. Thanks, everybody.
Jeff,
All right, guys.
Jeff, question.
Yes,
I wanted to know, how was mine?
yours was good. I'm gonna send it back to
Was
you.
it?
Yeah, you did a great job. Yep.
Okay.
But you're an A student, so that's why I didn't.
It took me a long time, but I put my heart and soul into it.
Yeah, but aren't you glad you took the time now rather than when you're writing your first offer or second offer?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's why I do that. Yeah, I don't, you know, I mean, the group has gotten so big when like, you know, Susan and other people, Terry and everybody, we would just kind of go through it here, but it's so big now that I'm sending that contract out as a kind of a spot quiz. And
right, no, I appreciate you doing that. When I wrote you back on the email, I said this was really good practice for me in the future.
Yeah, you did a great job. And
Thanks,
I
Jeff.
have yours yet. So, and Susan, I didn't send you one. If you want one, I can send it to you. You can write.
Yeah, that would be great.
I figure you've been in enough classes, though. I didn't want to, you know, I didn't want to bore you, but
No, that's not going to bore
All
me
right.
at all. I
Okay.
wanted to ask you a quick question, if that's okay.
sure.
You know, the house, that Loomis house,
Yes.
and I'm not the agent anymore, but
Yes.
one of the people that I showed the property to, the house still hasn't sold, even though the price has been reduced.
Right.
But that person might be interested in like a greatly reduced price, but still making an offer. Would it be unconventional for me to reach out to him and say, hey, do you want to offer like $100,000,
No, I mean, it would be,
less?
that's called salesmanship or saleswomanship, right? And just
So
call them and say, listen, house is still available. I don't know what they'll take, but let's write something up. You know,
Okay,
what
okay.
would you be willing to pay for this place? Right?
Yeah, I think that they would be willing to be around 8, but I just want to make sure it was a conventional
kosher.
thing to do. that I
Kosher is the
could-
word. Yeah.
Okay.
It's, yeah, it's, you got to do something pretty bad to cross the line in this business. So
Okay, good.
you're fine. You're fine.
All right,
All right, ladies.
all right, thank
Thank you,
you.
Jeff. Bye-bye.
I have a question for you.
What's that?
I'm showing a house this afternoon that